Let's fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good evening. Really a tough act for me to follow. My name is Brendan Crichton. I'm the state senator for the 3rd Essex District, representing Lynn, Linfield, Marblehead, Nahat, Saugus, and Swampscott. It is Pete in the house. And it's an honor for me to be here tonight. My colleagues from the House couldn't make it. They're deliberating the budget right now at the State House. But I do want to recognize State Representative Lloyd Ehrlich, State Representative Dan Cahill, and State Representative Pete Capano, and State Representative Donald Walker, who would all be here if they weren't working hard right now at the State House. And I really want to give a big thank you to Senator Ed Markey for putting this together and for coming to the city of Lynn. There is no better form of democracy than when we're talking together face to face and having a civil discussion about important issues, and this is exactly what we need. I look out, I see a ton of advocacy groups, I see a ton of community members, and a ton of passionate people that are all passionate for different reasons. And whether you're here because you care about the environment, or you're concerned about climate resiliency, or public health, or education, or workforce training, or transportation, the Green New Deal has a little bit of that for everybody that's here, and it's so important that we continue to have this conversation about the things that are going to matter for some of the younger folks I see out there, for my 3-year-old son, and for the next generation. And a man that I've got to know and work with for many years is just as passionate for all those issues, and now is taking his talents to the city of Lynn as our new mayor. It's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Tom McGee. Thank you.
Before we get started, I want to just recognize some people that are here, and I want to thank Superintendent Tutwiler and Principal Cohen for hosting us here tonight. Great show place for us and for Senator Markey. Councilors who are here, Buzzy Barton, Brian Field, Brian Lapierre and Hong Nat are here with us, Diana Chakutis, Fred Hogan, and Jay Walsh. I want to thank them all for being here tonight, as well as on the school committee, Donna Capola, Lorraine Gately, Brian Castellanos, and Jared Nicholson. We work really closely in the city together with those members of the school committee and council, as well as those that couldn't be here tonight, and Sean Fitzgerald, town manager for Swampscott as well. It's an honor for me to be here tonight. I think Brendan's right when you're talking about the Green New Deal. I've been in the job since January of last year. And in that period of time, we've had numerous floodings, particularly down on the Saugus River, lower West Lynn. Last fall or in September, we had 8 inches of rain in less than 2 hours that completely inundated the city, and I'm 63. I don't remember 8 inches of rain any time in my lifetime in that period of time, and it really overwhelmed the city of Lynn. We are really facing some real challenges, and this Green New Deal is something that we need to take a look at and understand. We together need to find ways to address the issues that are impacting us every day. It's not something that we're not seeing, it's something that is happening every day. And I'm really honored to recognize and introduce someone that's been a great friend of mine for a long time, and welcome him back to Lynn, because he's been in Lynn many times before, both as a congressman and as a U.S. Senator. He's a great leader, he's a great friend, and he's really taking on the challenge so that people understand the impact in communities like Lynn and around the North Shore, the impact of not addressing the climate issues that we're facing, and like I said, we're facing it every day in the city of Lynn. I'm honored to be here with our great U.S. Senator, Senator Ed Markey. Let's give him a round.
And I want to thank our great mayor, Tom McGee. Tom, you're very fortunate to have Tom McGee as your mayor. And I will tell you, he's the chairman of transportation up in the Massachusetts State Senate. And he's not done yet, because it's good for a Green New Deal to have the blue line come up here to Lynn. I'm working hard on $1 trillion infrastructure bill that will provide money to Massachusetts in order for that to be accomplished. And Brendan is, he's more than a rising star. He is a star up in the Massachusetts State Senate. And I'm really proud to call him my friend, and just absolutely phenomenal work, which he has done and he is going to do in the future for Lynn, but for the entire North Shore. So, here we are, and the Green New Deal is 9 weeks old, but everyone in America now has a view on the Green New Deal. What it has done in just the 9 weeks since I introduced it with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is that it has unleashed a debate on climate change that we have not seen in 10 years. How bad was it? Well, in 2016, no reporter asked Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump about climate change. I think the Green New Deal has solved that problem for the 2020 election cycle. I don't think anyone who is running for president will be able to escape having a plan on climate change if that candidate believes in climate change. And I only say that because we know that the denier-in-chief works in the Oval Office, and that he believes that climate change is a hoax being perpetrated by the Chinese on the United States and the rest of the world. So, the debate has begun, and people ask, what is the Green New Deal? Alexandria and I sat down in the first week of December, and we began to think through what a Green New Deal resolution would look like. And here's what we decided. Point number one, that the United Nations scientists at the end of 2018 issued a report saying that the threat from climate change is much worse than they had thought, and that it was no longer 2 degrees centigrade that we had to keep our temperature rise to, but now 1.5 degrees centigrade, and that we only had until 2030 to take significant action in order to avoid the worst, most catastrophic consequences of climate change. At the same time, 13 federal agencies under the control of Donald Trump, but under a law that had been passed before Donald Trump, issued their own report. And that report said that if we do not take significant action, that the temperature of the planet will rise by 9 degrees Fahrenheit by the year 2100. And that in the worst case scenario, sea levels would rise in the Northeast, meaning Lynn and Swampscott and Marblehead and Nahant, by 11 feet. The United Nations said that climate change pose an existential threat to the planet. Climate refugees around the world, the rising tides that we just thank God when Hurricane Sandy hit, that it just didn't move a few degrees and hit Lynn and Nahant, the Swampscott, the Marblehead, the Newburyport. They would have become unrecognizable, but that storm will only be a fraction of what is coming our way if we don't dramatically reduce the greenhouse gases going up into the atmosphere. So, the evidence is clear. The planet is running a fever, and there are no emergency rooms for planets. So we have to engage in preventative care for the planet. And that comes to the second part of the resolution. The second part of the resolution says that we have to engage in a mobilization to move towards clean, renewable, non-greenhouse gas emitting technologies, to move to 100% clean, renewable, non-greenhouse gas emitting technologies, and to put ourselves in a 10-year mobilization to accomplish that goal. And to do so in a way that employs 3 million new people in our country in the clean energy sector, deploying wind and solar and all electric vehicles and new battery technologies and charging stations and rehabilitating our old buildings to the highest possible energy efficiency standard and ensuring that all new buildings have the highest possible energy efficiency standard. And that in creating those 3 million new jobs, we will engage in massive job creation in order to save all of creation. That has to be our goal. And these jobs must also include justice. We have to ensure that the most vulnerable communities, and that is historically where the power plants were located, those are exactly the places where the worst consequences of environment were in fact felt, where the highest asthma levels are recorded, the people who weren't employed in the industries that were generating the energy in our country, that we must do so in a way that ensures that the marginalized communities become central to the solution, so that we're all in this together. We have to lift all boats simultaneously economically as we are saving the planet. So, that's the goal that Alexandria and I laid out. And everyone now has a view on it. And there are some people who say, oh, socialism. And then our answer is this. If by socialism you mean the tax breaks which you have given on a permanent basis for 100 years to the oil, gas, coal, and nuclear industry, then give us some of that socialism for wind and solar and plug-in hybrids and all electric vehicles and for energy insulation in our country, huh? So that kind of hypocrisy on their side is at the heart of what this whole debate is going to be all about. And in the automotive sector, in the manufacturing sector, in the utility sector, in the agricultural sector, we lay out goals for them to dramatically increase their energy efficiency to the maximum extent which is technologically feasible over a 10-year period. Now, how do we know that we can do this? 10 years ago, 2008, just before Barack Obama was sworn in as president, we had 1,000 megawatts of solar installed in the United States. In other words, from the beginning of time until 2008, 1,000 megawatts of solar. Once we started to put those tax breaks on the books, once we started to put in the additional money for research, in 2018, 10 years later, 65,000 megawatts of solar installed. So, if you think of the Seabrook, if you think of the Seabrook nuclear power plant as 1,000 megawatts, just think that's all we had of all solar for the whole country. Now we're up to 65,000 megawatts just in 10 years, after everyone said, oh, we know renewables can't be the answer. In wind, we went from 25,000 megawatts in 2008 to 98,000 in 2018. In all electric vehicles, in your mind, pick a number. How many total all electric vehicles did we have in America in 2008? Just pick a number in your mind. You're wrong. We had 2,000 total in the whole country in 2008. This year, because of the laws we changed, it's going to be 400 to 500,000 all-electric vehicles that are sold this year alone. That's how quickly the revolution is moving. So what is the answer of Donald Trump? The answer of Donald Trump is he's now named a coal lobbyist to be the head of the Environmental Protection Agency. EPA now stands for Every Polluter's Ally. At the Department of Interior, he has named an oil lobbyist to run the Department of Interior. He placed a tariff on solar panels to make it more expensive for people to put it on their roofs. And he took my law. I'm the author of the 2007 law, which Obama used to increase fuel economy standards to 54.5 miles per gallon by the year 2025. And that's what's really created this electric revolution, because to meet that goal, you just can't use those old technologies. You have to just keep moving. And Trump has now ordered his Department of Transportation to roll back that goal. When I was a boy, President Kennedy, in response to an existential threat which the Soviet Union posed to the United States through their control of outer space, Sputnik, Yuri Gagarin, he went to Rice University and he gave a speech. And he challenged our country. And what he said was that the United States, as a mission, had to send a rocket to the moon within 10 years and return it safely. And in the speech, he said that we would have to invent new metals, new alloys, new propulsion systems, and that we would have to return that mission from the moon through heat half the intensity of the sun. And we would do it not because it was easy, but because it was hard. And we would do it successfully because we were Americans and we were bold. Well, Donald Trump is JFK in reverse. He says we cannot do it. He says we cannot make our vehicles more fuel efficient to back out all that oil from the Middle East. He says we can't make our buildings more energy efficient. He says we can't deploy any more wind and solar in our country. And so that's the challenge that the Green New Deal poses to the American people. Should we be satisfied with no increase in fuel economy standards, or should we want it to go from 55 miles per gallon to 65 miles per gallon, to 75 miles per gallon, to 85 miles per gallon? Can we do it? You know we can. Should we have solar at the level that we have it today, as far as it's just come in 10 years, or should it be an explosion that creates millions of jobs in the installation of these technologies all across the country? Can we do that? So for me, this is the challenge of this generation. This is the national security, economic, environmental, healthcare, and moral issue of our time. And we do not have a choice. Failure is not an option. The very health of the planet is at stake. And we have to go no further than just the Atlantic Ocean. We right now, in Lynn, in the oceans, it's just a mile away, are living next to the second fastest warming body of water on the planet. Only the Arctic is warming faster than we are. And how do we know? Because the cod are going north, they need cold water. The lobster are going north, they need cold water. We know because the storms are becoming more intense. Because as the water warms, it just creates the conditions for these extra strength storms that we have been living through. So we're the living science experiment. We're the laboratory. And for Gloucester fishermen, for our tourism industry, the beaches that we love, all of this is in jeopardy. The response from Donald Trump, he wants to authorize drilling for oil off of our coastline. How perverse is it that he would tell his Secretary of Interior that his goal is to actually take the people who are most affected thus far by the climate change and put oil wells out there to produce more of the fossil fuels that will warm the planet and export that oil to China, not even for our own consumption. That is how perverse the world is that we live in. And that's why we need a green generation to rise up and just take control of this agenda, to unleash the entrepreneurial, the innovation skills in our country. When I was the chairman of telecommunications in the 1990s, I passed a number of bills, but it started with a bill that moved over 200 megahertz of spectrum so that we could create the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh cell phone license. In 1993, you didn't have a cell phone because it was the size of a brick. It cost 50 cents a minute, and it was analog. By 1996, you had a flip phone in your pocket, for those of you who are old enough. But then, a remarkable thing happened because I moved over those 200 megahertz. 10 years later, another young man came along and said, I think I can create a device equal to the power of the computer on the Apollo mission to the moon and put it in everyone's pocket. And today, there are 800 million of these walking around in the pockets of people in Africa. Because 20 years ago, we decided to innovate. Well, we can do the same thing with energy. We just have to break down the control which the Koch brothers, the coal companies, ExxonMobil, and all their powerful, wealthy interests have. Just move them out of the way so that we can create these millions of jobs. So that we can save this beautiful planet that we live in. So that we don't see fundamental change to the way in which people live, not just here, but all around the world. So I thank you for coming this evening. This is an incredible gathering on short notice, but I think the magnitude of the issue merits your attention. And we put together a very interesting program for you here tonight. And I'm going to ask, first of all, let me just let me also thank Sheriff Kevin Coppinger for coming here tonight. I'm not sure if acknowledged. I talked to Congressman Seth Bolton yesterday. I think he's on the trail up in New Hampshire, but I just wanted to give a shout out to him as well. And Representative Cahill and Capano and Laurie Ehrlich, I think they're all up in the State House working on the budget issues. So we thank all of them. We thank all of them for all of their great work. And I also want to thank the North Shore Labor Council and the Met Senior Action Council for all of their work on this issue. So we have a couple of speakers. They'll each come up here for 5 minutes or so. Then we're going to sit here and take questions from people in terms of climate change or anything else that you might want to talk about, but hopefully we can keep it to climate change. Our first speaker is Roxana Rivera. She is the daughter of Salvadoran immigrants who immigrated in search of a better life. Roxana Rivera has been organizing low-wage workers for the last 25 years, fighting for workers' rights and justice for immigrants, and she runs 32BJ SEIU District 615 as the leader of that union. I give you Roxana.
Good evening, everyone. As the Senator said, my name is Roxana Rivera, and I'm the Vice President of 32BJ of the Service Employees International Union. We are the largest property service union in the country, with 20,000 members right here in Massachusetts, including hundreds of families living here in Lynn, and 175,000 total members up and down the East Coast. Our members work in buildings such as this as janitors, maintenance workers, and security. We are honored to stand with Ed Markey and all of you tonight in support of the Green New Deal. And we stand here recognizing that our climate and economic crises are intertwined and can only be solved with bold and effective government action and the involvement of working families, students, and communities. We want to be part of that debate. We want to be part of the outcome. We want to be part of the solution. So the members of 32BJ SEIU know all too well the impacts of climate change and economic inequality. They live it. Many of our members are immigrants, such as myself, that came to this country because of environmental destruction and systemic poverty. That meant they didn't have access to clean water to drink, well-functioning public transportation, educational opportunities, and the ability to build better lives for their children. Many of our members live in urban neighborhoods with high rates of pollution and asthma, from Dorchester to East Boston to the South Bronx, as well as rural communities in Western Pennsylvania and Kentucky, traditionally dependent on and impacted by the fossil fuel economy. When people talk about Black, brown, and poor communities most impacted by climate change, they are talking about our members of our union, 32BJ. This is why 32BJ in the last decade has worked with the industries our members work in to combat environmental destruction. An example in New York is our Green Superintendent Program. We have workers that take care of all the residential buildings, through which we trained over 3,000 building supers on energy efficiency measures. Right here in Massachusetts, we've worked with our industries, both contractors and building owners, to transition to green cleaning agents, which is not only good for workers, but also good for the workplaces that they keep clean. as well as our planet. We've been active with the Blue-Green Alliance, which is a collaboration of labor unions and environmental groups where we've come together to advance policies to reduce carbon emissions while creating good union jobs that workers can support their families on. But climate justice does go beyond just our workers using environmental friendly cleaning agents or making our buildings energy efficient or even passing local legislation, right? To truly reverse climate change, we need to think big, bold, and take national action, and like that's envisioned with this Green New Deal. For labor unions like ours, climate change is an environmental issue, it's an economic opportunity for working families, and it is a political challenge. This is an opportunity to tackle economic inequality and reindustrialize America with the green economy through jobs that, with the right training, can provide career ladders for many low-wage workers, immigrants and people of color, who struggle to afford the high cost of living. But the only way we're gonna make this even happen, right, and live up to what the Green New Deal speaks to is that we work together. So we're happy and honored as a union to basically join with all of you and many others in making this, this Green New Deal come to life. Thank you.
So that was great, Roxana. Thank you. And again, it's a revolution. The Green New Deal isn't just a resolution; it's a revolution. We're talking about, and it includes intersectionality, ensuring that marginalized communities are included, and just make sure that we are all working together. So. Joining us this evening as well is the great State Senator, Joan Lovely. So thank you from Salem down here today. Thank you, Joan. Fantastic. Great friend. And by the way, I didn't mention this, but I think you all agree with me that Emma Farris Howes, an 8th grader here at Thurgood Marshall Middle School, sang the national anthem about as well. By the way, she is the living proof that when Donald Trump says that we should abolish the National Endowment for the Arts, that's just the wrong direction to be heading in. We want to be encouraging these young people to maximize all of their God-given abilities. And what a beautiful school. Huh? This is an incredible school. And we're being hosted by the principal, Molly Cohen. Molly, where are you? Can you please raise your hand so you can be acknowledged for just the phenomenal school which you are running here. So thank you. And again, thank all of you for coming. And so we have one final speaker, then we will go to question and answer. And that speaker is a professor at Salem State University, and he represents the absolute best of what we produce in this state, which is science. We can actually say it in our state. It's not a curse word, because at some point in our life, are we 6, are we 5, are we 7? We all have one little trip we have to take. We have to go to the Museum of Science, and somebody's going to take us there. And we're going to be told that regardless of your religion, science is the answer to our prayers. And that we want the young people in our country to learn as much about it as we can. So what I've done is I've asked Dr. Stephen Young, who is a professor at Salem State University, to come here this evening. His recent research has centered on climate and environmental change in the northeastern part of North America. He has a master's degree in environmental science from Yale, PhD in geography from Clark University, and an undergraduate degree in environmental studies from the University of Vermont. Please welcome Dr. Stephen Young. Come on over, Doctor.
So I'm a scientist, and I was asked to come here to talk about the science of climate change. And in his beginning remarks, I think Senator Markey did a wonderful job of talking about the science of climate change. I might even start to call him Professor Markey. But I do, although he did say a lot of what I wanted to say tonight, I do have a few things to say. And first of all, science is a pretty straightforward way for us to understand the world. It's based on going out, making observations, taking those observations, and figuring out what's going on. And in the 1980s, we observed that our temperatures were climbing around the globe in many different places. By the early 1990s, the scientific community was almost 100% sure that the reason why the temperatures were increasing was because we kept putting up these gases, these greenhouse gases, that would slow the Earth from cooling down, and most of those gases were being created by human activity, and a variety of human activity, from driving cars to our agricultural system to a variety of ways. Then, in the 1990s, science could also help us figure out what's going to happen in the future. And so we modeled different things that might happen. And right now, we are living in the world that they predicted. The Arctic ice, which has been stable for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, is now rapidly melting. The ice in Greenland, Antarctica is also rapidly melting. And a number of other things. We've got stronger storms, we've got stronger hurricanes, the hurricanes that have more moisture within them. We've got increased droughts, and I could go on and on of what's happening. Science also allows us to look into the past. And through a variety of means, we could figure out what the climate's been like. And we've noticed that the rate of change, the speed of change that we are witnessing right now, we have not seen for tens of millions of years. We are at a geologic turning point. We're at the beginning of that turning point. The climate I grew up in is long gone. The climate that we're experiencing now will be in the past. What we have now is we have a world that is continually warming and will continually warm. That's the basic of our climate. And why should we be concerned on the North Shore here? Well, we've already heard about Mayor McGee talking about all the facts that are happening here. Our seas are rising. As the water warms and expands, and our oceans will continue to rise for the next 100+ years. Also, the melting of the ice from land like Antarctica and Greenland is adding more water. I've actually put a poster down here you can take a look at where sea level rise is going to affect the North Shore. It's not an issue of will it, it's an issue of when it will happen. And New England, where our rain is now coming in heavy rainstorms, with the warmth, pests are now moving through our area. Lyme's disease, which used to be just in southern New England, is now throughout most of New England. And so we have this continuing change. And I use satellites, and I look at the temperature of the surface of the Earth, and I look at snow cover. And one thing that's been happening for the past few decades is northeastern North America has been experiencing less and less snow cover. And when there's less snow, when there's snow, when the sun strikes it, most of that energy reflects back out to space. When we don't have snow, instead of reflecting, that energy gets absorbed by the Earth starts to warm up. And so I've recorded that those areas where we're losing snow cover, the Earth is physically warming up because that energy is not reflecting, it's being absorbed. And that's called a positive feedback loop, because as the Earth warms, more snow melts. As more snow melts, less energy gets reflected, more gets absorbed. And right now, there are a number of positive feedback loops that are beginning to kick in, that are beginning to move us. So it's not just the greenhouse gases that are in the atmosphere, but the physical environment is starting to move in this direction. And so we have a very narrow window. As Senator Markey noted, that we used to think that the Earth can't warm up more than 2 degrees Celsius since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. We've already heated up about 1 degree Celsius. And so now the concern is perhaps it's 1.5 degrees Celsius. And so the urgency is that we know that if we don't do anything, the climate's going to get out of control. And the urgency is that we have this window to do it, and the wonderful thing is that we have affordable, scalable solutions to the issue that we faced, which the new Green Deal talks about. And actually I'm proud to be in the state of Massachusetts, because the state of Massachusetts is moving forcefully forward towards decarbonizing our economy. I'm very proud of working at Salem State University, where we are reducing our carbon footprint and teaching students about climate change. And I'm really, really happy that our senator is Senator Markey, and he is trying to bring along a revolution that we need to change what we're doing. Thank you.
Now we can move to questions from the audience and have people come up and ask our experts or make a comment which they might wish to make about the subject. So let's begin right over here. And could you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Vanessa. I go to Lynn English. I'm a senior.
So you go where?
Lynn English High.
English High, excellent. Congratulations on your basketball championship. The first one in 80 years. Incredible.
Yeah, my first question is how do you plan to help the people that will be losing their jobs in drilling and marketing these coal and oil products that you plan to cut off?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So what we have to do is ensure that as we move through this transition, that it's a just transition, and that we guarantee that the workers in the old industries get the job training they need, the health benefits which they need, the unemployment benefits for as long as is necessary for them to find new jobs. So it will be a transition, there's no question about it, but for example, in the coal industry, there are 50,000 coal miners left. Well, the number for solar and wind is now 350,000 workers. And this has all occurred really in the last 10 years. So if we take off all of the shackles on this industry, we could go to 700,000, 1.4 million wind and solar workers, and who are they? They are roofers, they're electricians, they're blue-collar workers who will be installing all of this wind and solar, all these battery technologies. But we can't forget the workers from the past, and we have to ensure that we provide for them and for their families, but especially to help them with any job transition which is necessary for them to be able to provide for their families. And I think that has to be a big part of this problem. And I know because my father's from Lawrence. He went to Lawrence Vocational High School, and when those mills shut down, it had a profound impact on the Markey family. But that lesson is not lost on me, and I think it's a critical question which you're raising, and I think it has to be a central part of the Green New Deal, that we are really just to those workers in the oil industry. So thank you. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Yen. I'm 18. I'm from Lynn English High. My question, so you say that this would be done by 2030. What's the practicality of that, and how are you going to enforce the new, the new standards?
No, that is a great question. So our goal is to accomplish this by 2030. President Kennedy said that we were going to send a mission to the moon within 10 years and return it. Now, if it had taken 12 years or 14 years, I think we'd still be proud of President Kennedy for sending that mission to the moon and returning it safely. And the Russians, the Soviets would have known we control it. So our goal is 10 years, but if it takes a little bit longer, then that's it. And the only obstacle that I see is not a technological one, it's a political one that Trump and his fossil fuel allies and these hundreds of millions of dollars that get sent into the political system continue to slow down this revolution, but if we can get that out of the way by the end of 2020, here's what I imagine happening. I imagine the new president on January 20th of 2021 addressing the nation, looking down at them all, and announcing to the American people, now that we have a new president, that president is going to tell the EPA to change the regulations on polluting devices, to change the regulations in the Department of Transportation on these 60, to say to the Secretary of Interior that they are going to open up new lands for wind and solar on public property across this country and off of our shores, and that he is going, or she is going, to get on a plane and fly to China by the end of the week and tell President Xi that business as usual is over, and then fly to India and tell President Modi that business as usual is over, that the United States is back as the leader, no longer the laggard on these issues. And if we do that, then it will take a lot shorter time than any of the experts have up on the scoreboard. Because the United States, when it sets its mind to creating revolutions, it is always successful. So thank you for your great question. Yes, over here. No.
Hi, Senator Arthur Powell from Beverly. I want to thank you for providing us with an opportunity to be part of this discussion this evening. My question is, as you mentioned, rising sea levels are reported to present the greatest financial impact to Tampa, Miami, New Orleans, New York, and Boston. What would you recommend as a course of action for the folks in this room to help to raise awareness of this pending crisis?
Okay, well, you know, Massachusetts is the Bay State, but we're also the brain state. Huh? So our job is to show that this can be done. So we have to lift our gaze to the constellation of possibilities in the deployment of wind, in the deployment of solar, in creating the funding mechanisms for the increase in the energy efficiency of our old buildings, and ensuring that our new buildings have the highest possible energy efficiency, and that we have the tax breaks that incentivize people to buy the all-electric vehicles, and that we say to, and by the way, our Eversource and National Grid have already announced that they're going to deploy 30,000 charging stations across our state in the next 5 years towards the goal of 150,000 charging stations within the Commonwealth. So all of that is part of Massachusetts going first, showing that we can do this, making this transition in a way in which we're encouraging technological revolutions to take place. And by the year 2030, I think we can have this largely on the road to success. But Massachusetts is already a leader. We'll be #1 in offshore wind, 1,600 megawatts by 2025, maybe 2024, maybe 2023. But instead of 1,600 megawatts, we can make that 3,200 megawatts. We can make that 4,800 megawatts. We can make it 4 or 5 Seabrooks worth of electricity that's coming in off of the ocean. The same wind that blew the Pilgrims here, that blew the perfect storm our way, we can harness for the electricity to power our homes and our industries, and we can do it in a telescope timeframe if we, as Massachusetts, become the leaders on all of these issues. So I thank you for your great question. Thank you. Yes, yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to ask you a question. My name is Jim Maroney. I live in Manchester, Massachusetts. And as an individual that grew up in the 60s and college in the 70s, I was, inundated with Time magazine, ice caps, expanding ice, where Canada, parts of Alaska were going to be uninhabitable. You fast forward 20 years to the 80s, where now it's the global warming, climate change, Bangladesh, 20 million eco-refugees were going to be displaced, 3 feet underwater, and on and on with some of these items. And I'm not a scientist, but just from reading, and none of these disastrous situations have really come to pass. So now you hear the new Green Deal, and you hear the very serious consequences especially when the U.S., I believe it's correct, is less than half the emitter of CO2 than China and India, who are not subject to the Paris New Accord. How do we even make an impact? And
Okay, good, thank you. Well, the answer is this, that China and India, they look at us, and they say, do not preach temperance from a bar stool to us. Do not tell us what to do if you are not doing it yourself, any more than you can have a beer in your hand and a cigar and tell the kids don't drink or smoke. So the United States has to be the leader. That's number one. Number two is, it is true that our emissions are now lower than China dramatically, but it's also true that a very high percentage of the CO2 up in the atmosphere is red, white, and blue because we started our industrial revolution 200 years ago, and it doesn't easily leave the atmosphere. It sticks. So when they look at us, they say, you know, you're not doing it. Trump says it's a hoax. But they also are suffering from huge pollution problems in Beijing. Huge pollution problems in Delhi. And so there are environmental movements developing in those countries as well, but they suffer from the same powerful coal industry lobbyists in their own country. And the only way in which we can be successful politically is if the United States is the leader, we bring Europe with us, we bring developing countries with us, pointing the finger at the countries that continue to ignore the reality of the science. But the first step is for the United States to accept the science, which President Trump is refusing to do. So the beginning of this is in our own hands politically. And that's why the election is, in 2020, absolutely critical, because time is running out. In many ways, if Donald Trump gets reelected, it's the equivalent of a death sentence for this planet. And we have to ensure that we do not have a president who has pulled out of the Paris Agreement, who is naming coal lobbyists to be the head of the EPA, because we have no political credibility with any other country in the world. And it will only happen if we assert our political, economic, and moral leadership. So thank you, sir.
I do want to make one comment, is that often the media does not present what's really happening in the scientific community. So there was never a period in the 70s where the scientific community thought the world was going to get colder. Time magazine and some of the media picked one or two people that had this wild theory, but in the scientific world, we knew that the world was already starting to warm up. And so that's a misnomer sometimes that the media puts out there about a calamity that's not actually in the scientific community.
And I'll give you one staggering number. From the beginning of time until 1989, in terms of greenhouse gases emitted from human causes, it's been matched in the last 30 years. That is from 1989 to today. That's how rapidly the greenhouse gases have accelerated since China and India and other countries have entered into their economic development. So we just have to have them accept the inexorability, the inevitability of catastrophic consequences for their countries and an insistence that they follow the United States and its lead. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Kerry. I'm from East Boston, and the Green New Deal you proposed was amazing in a lot of ways, but just one thing I worry about is it doesn't actually call for an end for the exploitation of fossil fuels, and I'm worried that we're still going to be drilling, refining, and then just exporting fossil fuels in the future, regardless of whether we pass this Green New Deal or not.
Right, so our goal is to reduce dramatically greenhouse gases. We include carbon capture and sequestration as part of any solution that you can use the traditional sources of energy as long as you capture the carbon before it's emitted. But ultimately, the revolution which gets unleashed with wind and solar and all electric vehicles, it's going to move us to, within 20 years, to an almost entirely all-electric world that we live in. Because it will be wind and solar, it will be renewables that are generating, and then we'll be plugging in the all-electric vehicles into the sides of our homes or where we work, and we're going to see this dramatic reduction in fossil fuels because of the technological revolution that moves us over towards these new technologies. So that's ultimately the goal, but we don't rule out that perhaps there could be a technological breakthrough with carbon capture and sequestration that could be affordable. It's unlikely, but it is possible. So thank you. Yes?
Sir, my name is John Taylor. I'm from Beverly. And it's not clear to me exactly what the Green New Deal is. Somebody told me it's an idea, and another person said, oh, no, they're going to make you buy electric cars. So what is it?
Well, as I said earlier, the goals that we set in the agricultural, manufacturing, utility industries, the automotive sector, very high advances in the deployment of renewables and energy efficiency in our society. And to achieve the goal, which is maximally technologically feasible, and to do so within 10 years. We then invite the proposals for how we accomplish those goals. And it's clear that tax breaks for many of these technologies, if they're put on the books, they will accomplish the goal, because we already see what has happened with the already existing tax breaks for all electric vehicles and wind and solar and battery technology. And we also want extremely high building standards. This building is one of the most energy efficient buildings in the United States of America. Why? Because Lynn wanted their new middle school to have the highest standard of energy efficiency. So you just have to make it your goal. And if we pass the resolutions that accomplish that goal, for building after building, vehicle after vehicle, energy generation source after energy generation source, then we're going to be successful. And for example, we could create a revolving fund for buildings here in Massachusetts or across the country. Put in $50 billion, that could leverage upwards of $500 billion, and just say to communities with all of their older buildings, we'll give you a very low interest loan, maybe 2 or 3%, if you rehab your building, and you can pay it back over 20 or 30 years, and at the end of the day, it hasn't really cost anything because people have paid back the money from that revolving loan. So ultimately, it's going to take not one, not two, not three, but dozens of very smart programs that are put on the books depending upon the sector that we're talking about in order to accomplish this goal, including agriculture. We have to change our relationship with the way in which we farm in this country, but we can do so on an affordable basis and keep farmers very prosperous. But it's going to take something that in detail after detail and policy after policy just says, here's how we can work smarter and not harder. That has to be the goal. And where do I get that phrase from? My mother. When I was 10, 11, 12, my mother would always say, Eddie, your father and I are going to donate your brain to Harvard Medical School as a completely unused human organ. So right now, we're working harder, not smarter. And the goal of the Green New Deal is to lay out dozens of smart policies, depending upon the area, that will ultimately accomplish the goal of us working smarter. So, yes, over here. Yes, sir. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello, Senator. I'm Seth Boltzmann. I'm from Marblehead. And I was wondering, you talk a lot about using wind and solar to transform the country off of fossil-based fuels in 10 years. I was wondering if we could use nuclear power as a way to transform the country off of carbon-based.
Yeah, nuclear power is something that is not ruled out in the Green New Deal, but realistically in the economic marketplace, wind and solar are now less expensive than nuclear power, and it takes approximately 10 or 12 years to build a nuclear power plant, 1,000 megawatts, and if you are a utility executive, you'd be much more likely to say, well, now with the cost of wind and solar so inexpensive, and you can finish the whole project within 2 years, it's much more likely they're going to head in that direction. But you don't want to rule out nuclear power at the same time. If it can compete in the marketplace, then it's something that absolutely should be considered.
Hello, my name is Paul Quinn. I teach at the school, science. I also teach climate change theory. I have more of a comment as far as I want to talk about over-reliance on science and their predictions, okay? So when I was a kid, I'm going to read a couple of excerpts here, which the prominent scientists of that day, they had these predictions, okay? So we'll see how many of they came true. Okay, this is in 1970. The prediction was end of civilization in 3 decades. Then that would be in 2000. Did we have the end of civilization? Okay, that's one example. Here's another one in 1985. Air pollution will cut sunlight in half. I don't think that happened. Here's one in 1970. These are prominent scientists of the day. Entire nations will be wiped off the face of the earth from rising sea levels by 2000. I don't think that happened.
Okay, so we have the point now. I understand your point. So what I'd like to do is, we have a scientist who is here, and I'd like to give him a chance to put this question in overall scientific perspective. Professor.
Sure, there are a number of predictions people made that did not come true. That's absolutely true. And also, we actually tend to underestimate than overestimate. So you've pulled out a few of those predictions that overestimated. There are a lot of predictions that have underestimated. In fact, the melting of the Arctic sea ice, we underpredicted that from the 90s.
Oh, that's 209. 209 is 75% chance of polar ice caps melt in 5 to 7 years. That would be in 216.
So we could get up a scorecard. We could find out which ones we underpredicted, which we overpredicted. And my guess is that we would have underpredicted than overpredicted.
My only concern is it seems like we're creating fear.
Well, can I say this, sir? Okay, and I appreciate what you're saying. Here's where we are today, however. That's when you're referring to scientists, individual scientists in 1970 or 75. That's an individual. What we have at the United Nations is the scientific consensus of all scientists on the planet in 2019. And we have at the 13 federal agencies with jurisdiction over climate a consensus amongst our own federal scientists. Not one, not two, all of them. So the debate is over on climate science. It's over internationally. Let me come over here with you, Nolan. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for coming.
Hi, Senator Elisa from Saugus. So yesterday, New York City unveiled their own personal
introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Elisa from Saugus. Thank you, Senator. So yesterday, New York City announced their own personal Green New Deal, which is awesome. But in that deal, they included a phasing out of processed meats and a 50% reduction in the amount of beef that they're ordering in city-operated facilities. I've heard you talk a lot about agriculture today, but I haven't heard it mentioned in terms of our overconsumption of meat and the effect that it's having on our planet. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Okay, I'm more into climate than agriculture, but certainly the way that we produce our food has a strong impact on the environment. And to produce meat takes a lot more land area. When calories and energy transfers from each level, from plants to herbivores, and then from herbivores to carnivores, only 10% of that passes from each trophic level. And so a vegetarian diet, which relies on plant material, uses much less area to provide the energy, the protein, the nutrition than when we have cattle eating the grass and then us eating the cattle. I'm not sure if that's
In answer to your question, we can develop smarter ways to ensure that the meat that we're eating is produced from sources that do not substantially contribute to climate change. And we have to move farming, agriculture in that direction. And a lot of farmers are already doing it. And if we create the proper set of incentives, we can do that and deal then with the greenhouse gases, the methane that is produced out of the farming community. So thank you, it's an excellent question, thank you. Yes, yes ma'am.
Hi, my name's Reagan Crowley and I'm a nurse midwife at Lynn Community Health Center. And I'd like to just encourage you not to forget plastics and other petroleum products in this discussion. They're a massive environmental disaster every which way you look at it. And like if you look down in Cancer Alley in Louisiana where many of these are produced and other chemicals such as they're used in farming, those kinds of things, they're some of the worst polluters we have. And if you look at pictures, they're all barrels of petroleum products. So this is a huge thing, and they're actually investing a lot more money. The petroleum companies are investing a lot more money to make it so that we have new ways to use plastics, as though we don't have enough single-use plastic. Like try to avoid it. I would recommend that part of this Green New Deal be that everything that's produced needs to be biodegradable without harm to the environment or to human health within 80 years. Within a lifetime of these we have the technology to do this right now. It's not like we don't have the technology, and this is like one of the worst things that we are producing. And this is our heritage to the people coming on. It's a disaster, and we need to change our ways.
I agree with you. Fantastic point. Plastics, petroleum-based, we have to begin this transition to move towards more biodegradable products. We can do it. The green generation, the younger generation, definitely want us to head in that direction. So I tell you what we'll do. I'm going to continue here until 8:10, and that'll end this. And then anyone that wants to come up and talk to me or to our other panelists, we'd be glad to do so. So let's just keep going as quickly as we can to finish off the questioners who we have. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Andrian Iranian. I am from Swampscott. I have a question. How all this economical development will be financing? What is the source of financing for this economical boost? Because I am from the former Soviet Union, which was socialist country, and I...
So your question is, where is the financing for the Green New Deal going to come from?
Yeah,
that's an excellent question. So here's my answer to you. In 2017 and 2018, we in the United States suffered $400 billion worth of climate-related disasters. We saw the forest fires in California night after night. We saw the floods in Houston. We saw the tornadoes of much greater intensity hitting all throughout our nation. So if we do not take the steps which we must, the damage is going to wind up $20, $30 trillion to our economy. We already have studies of the lost property value in Newburyport, in Salisbury, in the coastline communities all along Massachusetts because of the erosion, because of the storms. We already can see the damage to our own state, much less the whole country, much less the whole planet. So we don't have an option because the damage is going to be infinitely greater than any money which we expend in order to avoid it. But here's the beautiful part about this. If we increase fuel economy standards, if we put the same tax breaks on the books as wind and coal and nuclear have received over their years, it's not going to cost 100 trillion, or 50 trillion, or 25 trillion, or 10 trillion, or 5 trillion. We'll be able to do it using the same economies that the existing fossil fuel industry, the existing automotive industry uses. So the costs are going to be far less than anyone thinks to implement it, but the damage is going to be catastrophic if we hit 9 degrees Fahrenheit warming for our whole country. And by the way, in the northeastern part of the United States, it's going to be even warmer according to the UN analysis. We're going to be even warmer. So we don't have an option. The costs are going to so far outweigh any investment which we make. And in the bargain, we create 3 or 4 or 5 billion new jobs that are sustainable. For these young people over here, if they decide they want to go into solar or wind or energy efficiency, and we pass our new laws, their jobs are future-proofed. They'll be doing it for the next 20, 30, 40 years as we change over our entire infrastructure within our country. So we get so much out of doing this, and the risk is so great on the other side if we don't do something. Yes, sir?
Hello there, my name is Warren Sato. I live in Lynn, the wonderful and getting to be more wonderful Lynn. One thing that breaks my heart is I look on Facebook and I see 1 minute these fantastic innovations and things happening and great potential, and then I see another post that says things are getting worse. It's kind of a roller coaster ride, which kind of creates an emotional problem on my part. But I just want to mention, you know, that I think you're fantastic. You're a humanitarian first, politician second. And let me put in some shameless promotion. There is the March for March for Science Boston coming up on May 4th. And for some reason, I tend to be looking at someone who would be a fantastic keynote speaker. that is something that's, you know, on your plate, and you can figure out what to do with it.
All right, so let me say, so here's what I would say. I am actually married to a scientist. When I met my wife 35 years ago, she was the chief of behavioral medicine at the National Institutes of Health. And then President Clinton in the 1990s made her the head of all women's health for the United States of America. That's my wife. So I'm married to a scientist, and I know my place. Okay? Political science majors know their place. So I will cheer on those scientists, but the voices of scientists are the experts. They're the people whose voices should be heard, because they're the ones who are saying to the deniers that this is an unavoidable catastrophe. So I thank you, sir, for... Okay, very quickly, please. So we have to, I want to get everybody in.
Real quick, there are those who doubt and even deny the viability, the credibility of collaborative science and technology. There are those who attempt to limit the diversity and inclusion of people from the scientific technological community. And my question is, how would you incorporate fact and evidence-based science, technology, innovation, and humanitarianism into the new Green Deal economy?
Okay, no, that is excellent. And that's a perfect question for Roxana to answer. How do we incorporate humanitarianism, equality, opportunity into the Green New Deal? You know, given what your role is in the types of people you represent.
I mean, I think it's part of, I have the mic, yeah. I think this is why folks like you, workers, we need to be part of this debate because we need to help shape what the outcome is, right? This was a resolution, we want to move it to legislation, but we need to be basic. This is the whole purpose of having these type of conversations is because we want folks to weigh in, right, and help shape this, right, and that it not be just, you know, and it's great that elected officials are taking, you know, the leadership and trying to kind of inspire this debate, but it is really upon us to basically shape what that's going to look like, and that's why for us as a union, we're saying we want to be part of it. We represent, you know, workers that clean buildings, right? They're largely invisible. And we're saying we want them to be part of this conversation, right? And everybody, the everyday folk a person is impacted by climate change, right? Whether it be living here with folks that are dealing with high incidence of asthma or pollution in their neighborhood, or if they're from a country that basically, or have family in Puerto Rico, for example, right, that was devastated by what was happening there. So I think there's a role to play that the everyday person impact their family abroad or here can really be advocating to try to shape what comes out of this debate and ultimately what would be legislation that we could all move forward with.
Excellent answer. Yes, sir.
My name is David Gass, Highlands Coalition in the great city of Lynn. While we're fighting for the Green Jobs Act, there are things that we could do ourselves. For example, in our neighborhood, we have a community garden. The term green refers to food that is grown with plants and trees. Now, our delegation got us 2,400 trees to plant in Lynn. Please think of planting trees, because plants absorb carbon monoxide and exude oxygen. That's very healthy. So we need to expand the idea of growing food. I will welcome you to join us and see what we're doing in the Highlands. 55 plots, people from 10 countries growing food. That's the basis of understanding the climate.
Thank you, sir. Think globally, act locally. What can we do here? Over here, yes.
Hello, Senator Markey.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
This is a one-woman multinational public interest movement unto herself.
I am now president of the North Shore Mass Senior Action Council, and I am first vice president on the state of Massachusetts. But do you realize that there are 6 out of 10 Massachusetts seniors who are still struggling to make ends meet? We struggle to pay for housing and for health care. We do care about climate control. We're grandparents. I have great-grandchildren. I'm worried for them. But at the same point, we need to know, will the Green New Deal also include subsidized housing and health care for all?
Well, what we did, excellent question. Here's what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I did. We went to the 1944 State of the Union of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, January. And he thought the war was coming to an end. And what he decided to do was, in that State of the Union, is to announce a second Bill of Rights for all Americans. And in that second Bill of Rights, in that State of the Union, Franklin Delano Roosevelt said that every American is entitled to health care, that every American is entitled to a job, that every American is entitled to be educated to the maximum extent of their human ability. So yes, the answer is, from Franklin Delano Roosevelt to the Green New Deal, it's in there, that everyone is entitled. And we're going to make sure that in his final year and a half, that Donald Trump does not slash Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. That will be the legacy of the Democrats, that did not happen. Thank you so much. Great leader. Yes, we're down to 9 minutes left to go.
Hi there, my name is Samantha, resident of Lynn. I had the privilege to meet you when you were on Capitol Hill in Congress, and to see you in action in interrogating people in consumer protection areas. I know that you're very passionate about this issue as it regards to consumer protection as well. I have a question for the scientist and a quick one for you. The question for the scientist is, in 2017, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, added brand new cloud formations to its database that had never been seen or described before. As a little kid, I've been looking up at the sky for a long time. I can tell you that there's new cloud formations that show in concentric rings, or that look like very organized patterns from a sweater. I would like to also, I've seen that the condensation trails behind airplanes used to disappear in a few seconds. Now it's minutes or hours for them to disappear. What are they spraying up there? But the question for Senator Markey is, with the Green New Deal, How does your Green New Deal differ from the one proposed by Jill Stein in 2012? And have you met with her or other Green Party folks? Thank you for your work that you're doing on our behalf, and thank you for bringing this to national attention. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I have not met with her, and I will have to read that in order to do a fair comparison. But thank you for raising the question, and I will do that. Yes, right over here.
Hi, thank you for being here.
Oops. We are not spraying special stuff up there. I mean, the contrails are condensation. However, there is talk because it's getting so warm, there is talk about NASA's actually talking potentially of spraying what we call aerosols. Lots of particles in our atmosphere to try to reflect the sunlight to go back out to space. We might have to do these major geoengineering things and actually change the composition of our atmosphere in a way that we really don't know what might else happen with it. Not just reflecting of the sunlight. And so, but currently, we're not spraying any special thing. The contrails and the clouds are all atmospheric effects that are natural.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, over here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Mary Klug. I'm from Marblehead. I want to thank you for being here tonight. I am involved very much with the book Drawdown. Are you aware of the book Drawdown? The 100 most substantive ways to draw down and sequester the CO2?
Yes.
Yes. I want to ask you if you think most people know what they want to do. Do you think people know what they want to do? Or what to do?
Well, it's a good question. All issues go through three phases: political education, political activation, political implementation. So we're now having a debate on an issue which the science is absolutely clear. How you solve the problem now is the debate which we're trying to open up in the country so that Americans have an opportunity to agree that we should increase fuel economy standards, have tax breaks for wind and solar, increase the efficiency of the buildings, make sure that we change our farming practices. So I think what we're going through right now is that political education phase. It's very encouraging to me that every Democrat running for president now talks about the Green New Deal or their climate change positions. And I think as we get further along in this year, we're going to have the kind of informed electorate that knows what it wants to do. And so that's really what this whole process is meant to unfold.
Okay, I just want to say, for those of you who do not know what to do, and would like to know more about Drawdown, I'm giving a program on April 28th at Beverly Library. I invite all and any of you. What time? 1:45 to
1:45 Beverly
Public Library. Please come. I would love to have you there. You will learn so much about this book. It's the 100 most substantive ways to draw down the CO2.
You're great, thank you. That's a great book, by the way. Very good, thank you. Right over here, we're down to 5 minutes left to go. Yes?
My name is Karen Mack, and I live in Ipswich on a road which is underwater on a regular basis these days. Where I live becomes an island, so that's one big thing facing us is the huge infrastructure costs of this on the coast. I also teach here at North Shore Community College. I teach environmental policy and protecting water resources. And so I want to just put in a word here. Is there a piece of the Green New Deal that will make it easy for us to figure where to put our money as customers, for example, by certifying sustainable products that are the result of sustainable forestry practices, or food that is produced organically, because organic farming has the potential to sequester a lot of carbon. So that's one, those are two pieces of my point. But I want to say one other thing that's really important here on the North Shore. It's not so much a federal issue, but it's something that maybe should be, and that is that our water supply is extremely vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. I was the head of the Ipswich River Watershed Association for almost 2 decades. It was named the 3rd most endangered river in the country in 2003 because it is literally pumped dry because of so many communities drawing water from it. By the way, Lynn gets some of its water from the Ipswich River. And in 2016, during the drought, people actually held a breakfast in the Ipswich River because it was so dry. That was in the town of Ipswich. So our water supply is a huge vulnerability that I hope will be part of the equation here.
Exactly, and when you talk about water supply, it's endangered here, but when you think of the conflict in Somalia, that's a drought. Climate change related drought, and the warring tribes now have to fight over scarcer and scarcer resources. When you look at Sudan, same issue. When you look at Syria, same issue. So when you look at a lot of these conflicts around the world, what's happening in Ipswich is happening on an even larger scale and causing conflicts that then draws the United States and our young men and women into the middle of conflict that is only going to intensify as these resources become more scarce in the years ahead. Thank you so much, and thank you for all your work. And we're going to come right over here with the final question, which is going to be a duet. And if you could each introduce yourself, we would very much appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Judy. I'm from Lynn English.
And hi, my name is Chris Nades, and I'm also from Lynn English.
I was wondering how we have the minority class be more involved in this problem.
And then, like, just to piggyback off of her fact, I know living in Lynn, it's mostly a poor and urban community, so how are you planning to employ and utilize a society that relies so heavily on coal and like oil products, especially because of the new proposals you're offering? I know that I don't have money for a new electric car, so how are you planning to include and utilize urban communities to really make a change in climate change?
No, that is excellent. So, in answer to what you can do, if you don't, do you have an environmental club at English High?
Yes.
Yeah. You want to get everyone to join. That you start, you can't agonize, you have to organize. So organize first at Lynn English, bring more people in, get them involved. You heard the mayor and the senator, you're knocking on an open door. They're ready to go. They're ready to implement recommendations that you and your cohort at English High might come up with. With regard to the transportation patterns, okay, we have to move more towards bike paths. We have to move towards rapid transit. That's why the blue line is so important. That would take thousands of cars off the road from the North Shore as people would just go down into Boston on the blue line. That would help. Advocacy for that so that people who just want to walk or just want to take the train can do so, but you need to have access to it. But honestly, we're all looking to you for your leadership. I mean, you are going to, you know, you are going to do it. Whatever you organize, whatever you do, sign me up as part of your cause, and just understand that there's an election coming up in 2020. And to the answer to the first question, get involved, okay? The revolutions start here on the North Shore. This is where the American Revolution started. It's where the abolitionist movement started. It's where the suffragette movement started. It's where the freedom riders went down to the South in the 60s. They came from up here on the North Shore. William Lloyd Garrison, up in his statue in Newburyport, what he says is, with reasonable men I will reason, with humane men I will plead, but to tyrants I will show no quarter, nor waste my arguments. So that means political organization. And the more you get involved, the more important, you know, this whole election's going to be for generations. So thank you. And I see one final person over here, the great former mayor of the city of Lynn, Tom Costin, has graced us.
I stand here as a 92-year-old individual who in 71 years played a part in government from the local government to the state government to the national government. In all my years in government, I have met very few people that would stand in the shadow of Jack Kennedy. But one of them is the president we have here before us tonight, Ed Markey. Ed Markey. Ed Markey when he was in high school, because even then he was in government. He was working for a congressman then from Salem, and working with my oldest daughter. And he stayed in government. But the one thing that he has always remembered is that he is a public servant rather than being a public dictator. As a congressman and as a senator has always been what is best for the people I serve. And I just want you to realize that you have been in the presence this evening of a dedicated, true public servant in the United States.
Thank you, Tom Boston. 92 years old, they'll all sign the paper to take the deal, like you, at 92. So here's how we're going to finish up. I'm going to ask our scientist to give us his 1 minute summation, Roxana, to give us her 1 minute summation, and then I'll give you my 1 minute summation. So we're going to begin with you, Professor.
Okay.
What should these people remember from tonight?
The thing you need to remember from tonight is the science is clear about climate change, and we have a narrow window from which to act. If we don't act at this point in time, the climate change is going to be more difficult to deal with. And the Green New Deal changes the conversation about climate change from a gloomy conversation to an exciting conversation. And it's a way that we can move forward, and it's actually a very exciting time because we're going to need innovative ways in the future. And so I want to thank you for doing that, and please make it happen.
Thank you for being here.
I just want folks to take away that, folks are talking about, folks raise questions about a just transition for workers, and the whole thing is things change for workers on a daily basis, and climate change, is gonna change things for workers, right? It is, because climate change is not an opinion, it's a fact, right? And so then we have to be talking about what's that new economy, right? As we deal with climate change, and how are workers going to fit in that picture? And I think that that's important to understand that we want, it's important for workers, immigrants, people of color, poor communities to be part of the conversation going forward in shaping what will be the future of the Green New Deal.
Thank you, Roxana. Thank you. Can we hear it for Roxana and the professor? It's absolutely phenomenal tonight. And I thank all of you for coming out. This is the issue of our time. We can do this. This is the time, this is the place, we are the people who have to prove that this is doable. As the wise person said, this is the first generation to be affected by climate change, and the last generation which can do anything about it. That's how urgent this problem is. I thank you all on the North Shore for everything you're doing. Let's go on.